Hello, and welcome to The Human Factor, the video podcast of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company. Some entrepreneurs launch a business in order to upset an industry. Today's guest started her businesses to overturn a mindset. Phyllis Newhouse is the founder and CEO of, among other companies, Extreme Solutions, Inc., which helps organizations, including the U.S. Department of Defense and State Department, combat cybersecurity threats. Phyllis built her knowledge in this field during 22 years in the Army, where she was tapped by the late General Colin Powell to stand up a new cyber espionage command, essentially to build an infrastructure linking security communications across the entire military. She founded Extreme on leaving the service, a Black woman at the helm of a tech company with now 6,500 employees spread over 42 states. That's busting a lot of barriers. But there's more. She's also the founder and CEO of Shoulder Up, a nonprofit designed to help women entrepreneurs, and the CEO of two SPACs, the publicly traded special purpose acquisition companies that are all the rage on Wall Street today. That makes her one of very few Black women to take public, not one, but soon two corporations. Phyllis is a woman on a mission, and it's great to have her on The Human Factor. Welcome, Phyllis Newhouse.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Eric, today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. Now, you grew up in a family of modest means, the youngest girl of 11 children. It's not exactly a straight shot from there to the head of a SPAC and the head of a major government contract corporation in the tech field. So let's unpack that a little bit. What was it like growing up, Phyllis? And how did that create the foundation for the leader you are today?
Well, Eric, growing up with a family of 11 kids, there were 7 girls, 4 boys, my mom and dad. My father, I say, was a disciplinary, and my mother was the nurturer, and she was a talent manager. And I often always say that my mother was the first CEO I've ever met, because if you think about managing a household with 11 children. And by the way, there was 11 of us, but there were also 8 other kids in the home. My mother also, after her mother passed, she brought in and raised her 7 children as well. So it wasn't just 11 of us. And so, growing up, we had some clearly defined rules in the home with a father, who believed in discipline, but also too, he believed in really identifying, talent, and he was really very instrumental in who I believe I'm becoming, a great leader. My father used to always say, you're going to be a great leader one day. You're going to be a warrior. You're my little soldier. And so if you have those type of seeds sown in your life very early, you end up finding that I must be a warrior. My father's told me, so I must be a great leader. And so early on, my parents was very instrumental in helping us, each one of us, understand our value card. We used to have to come to the dinner table, Eric, and this is so funny today when I think back on this and how that really has impacted my life as a leader and teams that I've built. My father used to say, every time we would have dinner, he says, "What's your value card?" And no one could have the same value card at the table. And I used to say, well, my value card is leadership. And another person would say, my value card is I'm a great listener. And whatever that was, he always wanted us to realize that we all brought value to a family, and not everyone was going to bring the same thing. And so when I transitioned into the military, a lot of my foundation and the lessons that I had as a child, I was able to use a lot of that just in the military alone. And so growing up, I tell people today, it was a blessing being in a family with so many kids, but from modest means, not coming from a lot of money. And when I had, my older siblings, they were some of the first African-American students to go to, North Carolina State, UNC Chapel Hill. They were some of the first Black students. And so I came along, and so failure just wasn't an option for me after having so many siblings that have been the first to do something, the first to go to, an Ivy League university and those sort of things. So it really, I think, I come from humble beginnings, and I say that, and I'm so grateful for what we didn't have, but everything we did have.
That's a wonderful story. Value cards. I've got to remember that. That is great. Sounds like a great dad. Now you then spent 20 years in the Army. It must have really you must have really found something there. What was it?
When I joined the military, and one of the things I really liked about the military is the opportunity to lead and build teams. Now, remember, I came from a father who said, "You are a warrior, you're a soldier, you're a leader, and you're going to be a great leader one day." And so, going into the military really gave me an opportunity to see. I came in the military during an era when women were just starting to get the non-traditional roles in the military. And the first time I ever saw, I remember going to Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina, and my sister was in the Air Force at the time. And I remember going to the Air Force Base and seeing women pilots come off the flight line in jumpsuits. I had no idea why they all had on the same jumpsuit. I just thought it was pretty cool. And I said to my sister, "Oh my God, they all are wearing the same jumpsuit." She said, "They're pilots." I said, "You mean they actually fly the plane?" And that was my first moment into that empowered me to go into the military, was seeing those women Air Force pilots. And then when I went into the military, I realized that I saw very few women leaders in the top ranks when I first went in. And so that really gave me the desire, and it drove me to say, you can only make change when you're at the top. And so I strived to be a great leader, because I knew that there were a lot of things in the military that needed to change, but you needed somebody who was willing to lead the military through change. And so that's why 22 years, because I saw as I rose through the ranks that, I had a bigger voice, and that voice was needed in order for some things to change in the military.
All right. So a person on a mission even then. Now, speaking of non-traditional roles for women, the head of the cyber espionage task force that General Powell appointed you to was, by the very definition of a non-traditional role. In fact, I think the role didn't even exist until you started it. Tell me what it was exactly that you did, and what do you think it was that General Powell saw in a young woman, 30 years old, that made you right for this role?
Yeah. So during the time, cybersecurity has been around for a long time, just a different name, different era. But when you think of safeguarding, safeguarding military secrets, military intellectual property, the government intellectual property, it's been around for a long time. How we, handle classified information, who needs to know, et cetera, the protocols, putting those systems in place. So that's been around for a long time. But also too, people forget about espionage. Internal folks selling secrets to other foreign governments or our adversaries. And I think during that time, as the military has gone through lots of changes in terms of upgrading legacy systems. It's easy. At that time, it was easier for people to take information and store information in places and sell information to foreign governments. So standing up a joint organization was what was asked to do. Like we're going to when you have militaries that don't share information, and as you can see, even today, organizations are faced with sharing information across domains. And so one of the issues was, how do we alert the Air Force or the Navy, the Marines of potential breach or espionage? And so standing up that organization was really about the opportunity to bring many agencies under one umbrella so that we could help great military intelligence in order to be proactive versus reactive to potential breaches in our system. And so, it was 2,500 people up for that job. And, I thought for damn sure thought I was the least qualified. And so going through the process, I learned a lot about myself. And I also learned what great leaders look for in other potential great leaders. Because as I got through the process, I was told, do you know why you're here? And all the way, from the general, do you know why you're here? And I said, well, because I am of a great resume? And the answer was no. I said, well, I am a great leader, and the answer is no. And he said, I'll tell you why you've made it this far. He says, I'm not looking for somebody who's technically proficient. I'm not looking for someone who checks all the boxes. I'm looking for someone who has the greatest potential to lead. And that forever was a moment in the military for me to have someone like him say, you have the greatest potential to lead. And because a lot of times we can get caught up with the bios, the resumes, and we can say they don't check the box. And we miss a great opportunity to see what great potential someone has as a leader and to lead something. And so for me, getting that opportunity to do that and stand up an organization, I learned a lot. For me, even as a CEO today, is that don't always look for the best resume. Don't always check the boxes. Look for the person who has the greatest potential. And so for me, it was just an incredible lesson about who I was becoming as a leader and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to make others feel in a leadership position.
Wow, that is a fantastic story. And kudos to General Powell for seeing that in you. Certainly that falling in love with a resume is one of the biggest hiring mistakes that CEOs make, across the board. But when you hire, and you are presumably following the general's advice in looking for potential to lead, what exactly does that translate to? How do you perceive that in somebody standing in front of you?
So oftentimes, for me as a leader, when I think about a lot of the leadership qualities that I look for in a leader and the things that I want to be as a leader, I want to obviously lead by example. But, when I think about the difference between a good leader and a great leader, they're very different. And in the military, we used to say, a good leader. Oh, he's a great leader. And we could tell, we knew the difference between the two. So when you think about a good leader tells you what they can do, but a great leader makes you understand what you can do, right? And when you think about a good leader, is sort of like a magnet in terms of the personality. People want to follow, people want to be around a great leader. Obviously, Colin Powell was a great leader, and so he looked at, he wanted to breed great leaders, and that's what it was all about. So he empowered all the good leaders to be great leaders and saying, here's what you have the capabilities to do. And I think even today, as I look at a lot of the younger leaders in especially in this country and my field, I want to empower them to look at their greatness and what does it take to be a great leader, and what does it take to be a good leader. And some people are okay with just being good. But I think if you really show a leader their potential, and you give them opportunities and you give them resources and you can make those connection points, you're breeding great leaders. And I really believe that.
After a couple decades, you eventually left the Army, not, I assume, especially well-funded senior non-commissioned officer, and you started Extreme Solutions. Did you have a sense that cybersecurity was going to be a hot field?
I did, because, when I was in the military, cyber attacks was really kind of on the rise. Corporations was really struggling with this problem. And if you think about the military, I came out of the military where we were really safeguarding information. We had very complicated legacy systems that needed to be protected. And so we were working on lots of emerging technology. So I almost felt like at the time, military was about 5 years ahead of where private sector was. So my thought process when I left the military is I'm going to take all of that, what I've learned, and build the capabilities for the future for corporations. And so when I got out of the military, I was just really shocked as I started to go to different corporations and start talking about the cyber capabilities that they could build. I felt like I was speaking a foreign language to both of them because the military was so far advanced. And so I knew that I could build a company and I could build a great company based off of really where I saw the future going for cyber.
That first customer is always the toughest one to get. How did you get your first customer for Extreme Solutions?
That's a really funny story. I actually one day came home and I was realizing that, hey, you're going to be retired in about 60 days. So I got a board out and I just got this vision board. I really believe in vision boards. You got to see it before you can believe it. And so I got out a vision board and I put down who would be your ideal customers. And I put AT&T and I put all these different customers on the board. And I said, who would be your ideal team if you had to build a team? And where would you want to be? So I did all that. I said, okay, well, how much money do you want to make? How do you want to scale this company? So I put all this on a vision board. And then once I was done, I said, damn, now I got to go to work. I got to build this damn thing. So I actually got dressed up one day, went to AT&T building downtown Atlanta, walked in and said, hey, I'm here to see your procurement director. And they're like, well, do you have an appointment? I was like, no, I don't have an appointment, but they want to see me, and tell them that I'm only going to be here 45 minutes. And if they're not here in 45 minutes, I'm probably not going to meet with them in the future. So the person just laughed and they said, okay, well, let me see if they'll come down. So then they said, what's your name again? I told them my name. And then about 15 minutes later, the person who was over procurement came down. And she said, did you have an appointment with us? I said, no, but you need to get your cyber folks, anybody who's running security, they're going to want to hear the solutions that I'm here to bring to the table today. So she said, who are you here to meet with? I said, I'm here to meet with your procurement. So she goes up, she gets the guy who's running this research and development project for security. He comes down and he starts to hear a little bit of what I was talking about. And he says, do you have about 15 minutes you can come up and talk to my team? I go upstairs, I talk to the team, and he says, how many cyber folks can you get with the same capabilities that you have? We have a project and we definitely need the resources and the expertise. And literally I left there, got on the elevator and realized that I had nobody. And I had literally 20 days to find the resources to help them build out these cyber capabilities. And that's how I got my first start. It was just me walking into a building and had no clue to who was going to come down it or who was going to fall for it.
That is such a great entrepreneurial story. Congratulations. You are part of a great tradition, Phyllis. I love it. Now,
and to be honest with you, to this day, AT&T, as a result of that, end up doing a program for veterans because they realized a lot of veterans was transitioning out of the military with incredible capabilities, but who had a hard time translating that into how it could work in the private sector. And so I introduced that called Operation Hand Salute to them.
Well, like we said at the beginning, you are a woman on a mission. And the mission includes vets. It definitely also includes women and women entrepreneurs. There's Shoulder Up, which we'll talk about in a second. The leadership and many of the board members of your two SPACs are women. Where did this mission, especially to elevate women, come to you? Was it something you always carried with you? Was it something that you observed as a woman in business or in the Army? Just sort of what inspires you?
Well, what inspired me, when you look across most industries where, whether it's finance, whether it's tech, whether it's, the STEM industry, you tend to find, a very low number of women in those industries. And sometimes there's a bit of isolation that comes with being the only and being the only one in the class, the only one in this. And sometimes there can be a bit of isolation. And so for me, I went through the military and, I've been the only woman in the room and I've been the only African-American in the room. You at some point in your life, you're going to be the only something. And I believe that it is what you do with that moment and how you leverage the opportunity. I often used to say to women in the military, don't get caught up with the politics, but find partnerships. Those will take you further than the politics. And so if you think about with Shoulder Up, it was really bringing the framework of, how do we leverage? Because a lot of times, if women we're working in silos, a lot of times, then we all have one common goal of things that we want to achieve. But then if we don't understand how to shoulder up and come together and work together so that we can achieve that thing, that whatever that is, we miss a great opportunity. And so that was really how I got into understanding. I was hearing women in the tech industry talk about, not enough women, not the they were not getting the opportunity, leading projects, getting on board seats. I heard it all, and I kept thinking about this in a way to say, what if you had, this came from Viola Davis and I meeting when we first met. She was talking about in her industry in Hollywood, and I said, wow, that sounds like tech, the same problems. And I said, what if we could build something to where we could leverage that? Because sometimes we believe that you can have the deepest pockets, meaning the biggest checkbook in the room, but if nobody hears you, or know what you can do with all that, then it means nothing. And sometimes you can have the biggest mouth in the room, but no one can hear you because you don't have the money to back it up. But what if you had the economics means and you had the social impact and you put the two together? Then that's where you can create real change. And so the framework of Shoulder Up is using your economic power and your social influence and bringing that together with someone to create change in the lives of other women. And so really that's what that was really about. And it's applicable to every industry of how do you leverage, when you look at the lack of board seats and opportunities are there. I always tell women, it's not okay for you to be the only woman on the board. Be an advocate for others and get them to understand why having a very diverse board and the benefits to that, and being open and to talk about those things openly to other board members and explaining that. So that's really where that whole concept comes from.
Phyllis, you're definitely a woman with a mission to elevate women. Where did that come from? Was it something that you realized was needed to be fixed when you got into business? Was it something you had felt all along, or something you saw in the Army? Where did that sense of mission come from?
I think it's a combination of everything that you said, the military, growing up with 7 girls. But I think most importantly, when I left the military and I saw this in the military, women needed the opportunity to believe that they could rise to the ranks of where other women were, and being an advocate early on and in the room, helping women get promoted that deserve to be there. And then when I went into business, as I looked into the, tech sector, and I didn't see a lot of, most of the companies were, obviously led by a lot of men, but encouraging women to start businesses that had strong technical capabilities. And then, as I looked into the financial industry, it was the same thing. And so if you're not sitting in the room, you don't have an advocate sitting at that table. When you look at only 12% of VC funds have actually women decision makers, so they're deciding who's going to get funded and who's not. So if you think of the number of startups that are out there, only 2.3% of those women, as of 2020, 2.3% were getting funded, and that's a very low number. And so, and so, if you, in our mindset is with Shoulder Up, we think of it this way: if women would use their economic power and their social impact and leverage that together, that's where you're going to create real change in industries and around the world. And so think of this in this way. We look at women have capital. Those of us that have the capital, we want to deploy that capital to somewhere where there's an alignment with our own belief system. So if I have the capital and I don't have access to the opportunity, a lot of times it's just really about the access. So people say, well, women investors, you have very few women investors who have the capital, but may not have the financial literacy to understand how the whole investment process works. And so if you're on the back end trying to get funded and you really don't understand the process and you really don't have the right advisors on your team early enough to coach you through that process, you don't get funded. And so by the time you get 10 years in business, you're still bootstrapping this thing together. And that's why you see lack of women going public. 22 women had gone public when I went public with the SPAC. I was number 23, the first woman of color on any exchange, NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. And people say, how can that be with thousands of companies that have gone public? How can only 23 women have gone public? Well, because it's like lack of access to capital. And so I believe that Shoulder Up really brings this concept that let's leverage everything that we have, even if we have to use group economics to do it, because you're typically not going to get a woman to go out and write a $10 million check into another company. So usually, if they don't have that amount of capital, you have to use the group economics. And how we started it with Shoulder Up Ventures was that we wanted to get in together on deals. We all came together and said, listen, if the minimum check size is 5 million, let's all come together and we can write that one check with 5 million with all of us. And so that's how we started getting into deals using the group economics model. And again, that goes back to leveraging. Someone has access to the opportunity, but don't have the right amount of capital. And then if you leverage that with the women that have capital, then you can create change.
Okay, good. So that kind of syndication is still a far cry from where you are now with SPACs, which, as we said earlier, is sort of the latest financial darling on Wall Street. And just for people who might not know, a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition company, is a company that goes public and raises money for the sole purpose of acquiring another company or other companies. What was it that appealed to you about that model?
Well, so Eric, I started getting SPACs with my own company, Extreme Solutions, and SPACs started to come and they were pitching the SPAC. And here was a couple of things that I saw during that pitch. I probably went through about 8 different company SPACs coming to me, interested in me going public via their vehicle. And one of the things I saw, first of all, the folks that were pitching did not understand the industry. So if you don't have a great understanding of the industry, how can you help me scale in a public market? That was the first thing. The second thing that I saw is that there were no women in any of these SPACs, none. Out of all the SPACs that I talked to, they had no women on the management team, none on the board or the advisory. They were all males. And so there was another issue. And the other thing is that understanding the economics of how a SPAC worked, most of them would tell you their side of how the economics work, but assume that you didn't understand how it was economically going to be beneficial or not beneficial to you. And so after I went through that process, I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, this SPAC vehicle is very interesting. And I'm curious as to how many women are actually understand this or have been through this process or even know that this exists. And as we started to do research around this, we realized there was only Betsy Cohen was the only woman that was leading SPACs, where she ended up being our SPAC sponsor. The first SPAC, she was our SPAC sponsor. But so really that's how SPACs came to me, was because I had been pursued by SPACs. I decided instead of going with someone, I would go learn and how a SPAC works and then do a SPAC myself, along with the expertise of other women who had the expertise to lead a SPAC.
So you and Isabel Friedheim launched a SPAC that went public in March, Athena Technology Acquisitions Corp. And then in July made your first acquisition for Athena, Heliogen, a solar energy company. What appealed to you about that company that you acquired?
Yeah, so we when we first went on our target search, and on our top, we had 25 companies that made our top 25, and there were very strict criteria that we had. Our SPAC, first, before I say that, our SPAC had the expertise that spans across industry. We had women that came out of private equity, venture capitalists, we had investment bankers, we had technologists, we had women that had CFO experience, we had operators, women who were running companies in the 5 billion. We have women that running companies in the 7 billion. We had the first SEC commissioner was on the board. So we had our SPAC was very diverse, but it had a high level of expertise, and the management team had a lot of experience. And so what we were looking for in a company, we were looking for a company that aligned with those values that the SPAC had. We wanted to make sure that the company had a diversity and inclusion plan, that they also too had technology that was disruptive, but also scalable in a market, and that they met the public ready assessment that we were doing. We had a sort of a red flag assessment. And so Heliogen checked all of those boxes. And I remember the first time we got on the call with Bill Gross, the founder, all of us got off the call and was just like, wow, what did we just hear? Technology, very disruptive, very innovative solution. Also, he had a great team. He was a visionary, but also a great leader. And then we actually went out and did a site visit. And once we went out, we wanted to assess the culture of the company. All of us who had ran companies, have companies, were sitting in that same position. We understood what it takes in terms of when a company goes public. What does the culture look like? What does it feel like? Talking to all the management team, did they have a really strong management team? And really, was this a company that could scale? And so this was a no-brainer once we went through all of our due diligence, and we brought in third-party due diligence firms to help assess the company, and we did that. And so we felt like this was a company that we saw doing a business combination together was the right thing for the shareholders, but most importantly for the investors.
Okay, and the company, just for people who aren't familiar, uses artificial intelligence to concentrate solar power and create energy that way.
Absolutely.
The one thing about the company is it is fairly early stage. It has $8 million in revenue as of its last reporting, and at the acquisition price, it was valued at a total of $2 billion. It seems very rich, but how do you justify that value?
Yeah, well, we looked at it. This company has done partnerships with several, large solar companies, and if you a lot of what's been in the news lately, it's they've done partnerships with Woodside Energy. They also have had a really big deal. If you Bloomberg that just came out, and so when you look at their business model, they have already contracted to build these energy towers around the world, and they've already have contracts, and so it's a matter of really scaling this, scaling the production out to be able to do it. And we believe that they can do it, and we believe that the numbers that they have in terms of the committed contracts, and these are not just memorandums, these are actual contracts that they already have scaled to build out 20 of them by 2024. And so the numbers, and some say we were a little conservative. I think that it was fair based off of the fact that they have to build the first tower. They have a tower now, but we certainly still need to do this in real time, and that's going to be happening in early next year.
The newest SPAC, the one that just filed, the S1 that I read today was just 2 days old. It's called Shoulder Up, and which reflects back at your nonprofit. So tie the mission of your SPAC back to the Shoulder Up mission that you just explained so eloquently.
Yeah, so the new SPAC is really Shoulder Up is we're looking for a technology company. My background is in cyber, as you see in the S1. There are some household names in cyber that's on the board and involved with the SPAC, and we're tying this mission in. We've got a lot of what we believe. As you know, it's not all women led this time. We have brought a few of the guys are on the board with cyber background, but really it is about shouldering up with those companies out there this time to solve a global problem, which we all understand is cyber attacks. Or since the pandemic, we've had we're about 7,000% increase in cyber attacks. We understand that this problem is going to get worse, and so we believe that there are companies out there that this vehicle would be perfect for. In cyber AI, this vehicle is going to be perfect for that need the public capital in order to expand and grow and really solve some very complicated problems that we are seeing in cyber. So we're excited about this Shoulder Up, and we hope that each SPAC that we have, we really want to have a sense of awareness around this SPAC. And I would tell you this, if you look at the board, we have a lot of veterans that are in this SPAC who come from the military. And Benson Stewart ran the Cyber Center of Excellence out of the Pentagon. We have Sean Henry, who was the director of cybersecurity for the FBI, and now he's with CrowdStrike as a principal there. And so we believe that we really understand this landscape of the technology component in cyber, And also too, when we talk about the awareness, one of the things that most of us wanted to be committed to is talking about, our veterans that are leaving the military and the transitioning. And a lot of these guys have incredible skill sets. So we really hope to partner with a company out there that has initiative around hiring veterans. And so that's what we're going to be looking for, and certainly pushing that as an initiative to anybody that de-specs with us.
Okay. Still a woman on a mission. Thank you for being with us today, Phyllis. Phyllis Newhouse is the CEO of Extreme Solutions and the CEO of a just filed SPAC called Shoulder Up. Phyllis, thanks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been The Human Factor, the video podcast of Inc. and Fast Company. Thanks to Brian Cornelius behind the camera, to Lexi Birkin, Emma Gordon, and Catherine Meinel are the producers. I'm Eric Schurenberg. Thanks for watching.